Thank you, Mayor. So let me just start and stress that this is still an ongoing investigation. We are still trying to gather information from as many sources as possible, including the cameras. There's 9 cameras that have been referred to that are within Piedmont Park. And so we are still working with vendors to try and determine if there's any information we can get off of those cameras. To provide a little context, in 2008, there was a pilot that was done to install those 9 cameras. In 2017, there was an assessment that was done. Ultimately, those cameras are based on obsolete technology. They do not integrate with our video integration center. We have not removed those cameras because we do still think that their presence is valuable. As the mayor mentioned, she has committed and made a priority to invest in cameras across the city. We work closely with APD, Parks is involved, the Police Foundation and others, the communities, to determine where those investments are going to go and how we should best prioritize investments in the placement of cameras based upon the data. And so that's what we'll continue to do as we look to decide where we make investments in our camera infrastructure moving forward.
And in light of those cameras not being working the night of the murder, what steps are you all taking to ensure that they are working in the future? What's the time frame?
So let me reiterate, we're still working to determine if there's any information we can get from those cameras. As I mentioned, the cameras were installed as a pilot in 2008. The technology for those particular cameras is obsolete. And so now we have to look at if we're going to replace and make investments, whether in the park or around the park, which we have made investments in the camera infrastructure around the park, and we'll continue to assess as the mayor has stated, we prioritize installing 250 cameras by the end of December, prioritize what the locations for those cameras are. We have recently prioritized investment in camera infrastructure around recreation centers as well as parking lots in our parks, and we'll continue to assess that moving forward.
So Piedmont has been moved to the top of the list then as a result of this?
Piedmont.
I'm sorry. I just want, don't go, John. I just want to remind you all, we haven't had a murder in Piedmont Park in about 12 years. So this is a very unusual situation. But the reality is the vast majority of our parks don't have cameras in them. And so certainly when we have new information and we have something as horrific as has happened at Piedmont Park, we will have to evaluate it, but we've got to evaluate an entire city and make a determination. We don't want to make knee-jerk reactions, but certainly it is something that we will have to consider, but we're going to have to consider the entire city with a limited amount of resources. And again, the expansion of the 250 cameras is just the beginning. It's not the end. So we will take this into consideration, but we're going to look at crime stats. We're going to be in consultation with APD and Parks and Rec and see where our most challenged areas are. And certainly this will be a part of that conversation.
So is this a funding issue? Is that what happened pretty much? You said 2008 you guys did the pilot, and since then now it sounds like the technology is outdated. So was this just wasn't in the budget to get new cameras? What was the issue with that?
So I wouldn't say it was a funding issue. The question became when you replace the cameras, as I mentioned before, we are making a priority of investing in our camera system and our camera network. At the end of the day, we have to assess where those installations are going to go across the city. Parks is one of the areas that we consider as we do that.
Okay, one more question. Just to be clear, so the city is in charge of managing the cameras that are inside the park, but there's not like a process that you're checking, I don't know if it's a cloud that you get the video, like nobody's maintaining and checking, right?
So for all of our new cameras that we install, we integrate them to the video integration center, and we have a process to make sure that we understand when cameras have issues, and when they do have issues, we have contracts in place with vendors, and we have a process to get those cameras up and running as quickly as possible. These cameras, again, were installed in 2008. They're not integrated with the video integration center, and the technology is obsolete. But for all the cameras that we are installing now, that's a critical part of the process.